Hey everyone, Kevin here. A very common part of being an instructional designer these days is creating storyboards. My first ever ID job after leaving the classroom was literally just to create storyboards for a company, and then another ID would actually create the courses. A recent short term freelance gig I did was also just to create some storyboards as a proof of concept for this small startup company. Storyboards are just a really vital part of being an ID. And though not every job will necessarily need you to create them, and might just go with, say, a training plan instead, they nonetheless help you in laying out the information and coursework that you want people to learn by the end of a lesson. Today, though, I want to quickly go over the two types of storyboards and when you might use each one depending on the situation. And those two types are written and visual storyboards. Now, there are positives and negatives to each one, so this conversation won't necessarily be about which one is better, but rather which one is more applicable to your situation. Without any further ado, though, let's begin with written storyboards. And these are simple and fairly straightforward ones to make. Usually, written storyboards are created in Microsoft Word or in Google Docs. Considering the potential for better collaboration, I tend to opt for Google Docs myself, just FYI. With written outlines, you can format them many different ways, but I find that tables tend to be the best bet to communicate the information effectively and then organize the slides in a way that makes sense. It also allows you to show how scenes would flow together like a storyline, or how the lessons can be broken into bite sized pieces for RISE courses. As for what boxes to put in, well, that's up to you, but usually slide numbers, titles for reference, and a description of what each slide will have in it should be present, including what types of media you will need. Use bullet points and use short sentences to make all of this as easily digestible as possible. Written outlines like this are by far the best to share with stakeholders or SMEs because they are far simpler to review and provide feedback on. They can just look over the content you have, recommend changes or additions, and then authorize you to begin development if your company requires their approval. Written storyboards are usually the way to go when a course has narration, too, because it further allows you to focus on how the course content is presented rather than visual mockups that might only serve to distract from the content. The only real downside to this is that for people who prefer to see things represented on screen in order to get an idea of what it would look like to learners, this method may not be the best way to go about it. In the end, though, written storyboards tend to result in reviewers getting back to you more quickly, since often we need every minute we can get because they always want the training finished as soon as possible, right? This is why in my last job, which was incredibly fast paced, we mainly used this method to get approval. And as I alluded to a moment ago, this is exactly why visual storyboards, on the other hand, can be troublesome and are not the best choice when sharing with stakeholders, even if it may give them a way to better visualize the information. And this is because visual storyboards look radically different and are more like those you would see in a film or other media program. They literally show you what the slide will look like in the course by using most commonly placeholder images, graphics, or videos. Despite that, all the information is still there, and is why I would argue courses that lack narration and where all content will be shown on screen at once without any kind of video or animation are best suited for visual storyboards. I've found, though, that visual storyboards tend to encourage the idea to produce too much that should be created during course development rather than design. It's really easy to get caught up in perfectionism by making sure everything looks exactly to the point that you want to, and you spend way too much time designing rather than creating. Stakeholders and SMEs tend to not understand that this is just a mock up either, and get too fixated on this pre alpha look of the course rather than the content contained within it. In the freelance date I did a few weeks ago, the stakeholders demanded I use this visual storyboard because they wanted to see what it would look like, but I ran into this exact issue. They spent so much time critiquing the look that I had envisaged for the courses I was making, rather than telling me if they liked the information I would be presenting to the learners, which is the more important part. This led to me taking a week or more on something that might have taken me only a few days with a written storyboard. Like I said, they had a hard time getting past the notion that it's just an idea of what the course would look like and didn't realize it wasn't necessarily going to be the final product. Overall, that proved a little problematic. So I know I wasn't planning on saying which is better, but it does beg the question of, well, which is better? And neither is. It just depends on the training you're creating, the content that will be included, and the degree to which SMEs or stakeholders need to review it. Both have their positives and negatives either way. But I hope this gave you a decent overview of these two types to help you in choosing the best for you moving forward. And speaking of help, as always, I am here to provide it should you ever need it. Just let me know. But for now, I think I'll end it here. See you next time, everyone.